All right, let's get rolling. Hello, everybody. I'm Jamie Metzl. Welcome to our session entitled Optimizing Health, Pharma's New Frontier. Our topic today isn't just pharma, it's the future of health in the context of all of the changes that we're seeing around us, the broader changes in technology, the changes in society that we've been talking about, which has big implications for healthcare and the future of healthcare. And then pharma is one piece, but pharma isn't something that exists in and of itself. It exists within this greater context that we're here to discuss and explore together with all of you today. With me are my friends, new friends. Immediately to my left, we have Elmarie Bodes from AstraZeneca, and then Saeed Alnofeli with In5 Telecom Group, and Sharif from experimental Civics. So welcome to all of you. And what we're going to do is first, we're going to have everybody do a quick self-intro. So one just very short thing about your professional background, like one sentence, and one sentence about why you're actually here. So starting with you, Elmarie.
Hi, my name is Elmarie, and I am a Senior Director in Business Transformation at AstraZeneca. My background, I'm a pathologist, toxicologist, and also I have a horse farm, so something interesting about me.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm here is the first time in Dubai. I am very excited to be here and to connect with others, also passionate about futures.
My name is Saeed Alnofeli. I'm the Vice President of In5 from TECOM Group. I'm excited to be here. My job is to support startups in tech, design, media, and science. Last year we launched In5 Science, and we're here to support the science and medical startups who are coming through, so globally. So things about me, I would say I'm an engineer by training. I've worked in the industry, in the technology and innovation industry for the past 10 years. And one interesting fact is that I used to monitor camels and horses during racing. So I think maybe we
we got a bond here.
Discuss,
yes,
data.
Amazing. Sarah?
So hi everyone, my name is Sharif. I'm the founder of Experimental Civics. I'm also part of the Future Practice Group at NYU Langone Hospitals in New York. And so for the last 10 years, my career has really been in innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology. And fun fact about me, I don't know if I can meet you with the horses, but I will say that I absolutely love mountaineering and did complete Everest Base Camp.
Wow,
2018.
that's great.
Amazing.
Very exciting. So I'm Jamie Metzl. I don't know I was the keynote speaker in the inaugural Dubai Future Forum and a member of the advisory council here. So really thrilled to be here. I'll just tell you one little fun fact about me. I have a secret, but it's not so secret because I'm telling you now. Second life as a chocolate shaman, and in March, I'm looking to break the Guinness Book of World Records record for the world's largest sacred cacao ceremony, which we're looking to hold in the Javits Center in New York, inshallah. So with that, as I was saying before, more broadly than healthcare, we're in the context right now of just a fundamental transformation. In my new book, Superconvergence, I write about the significance of this moment, which is that after nearly 4 billion years of evolution, our one species has the increasing ability to engineer novel intelligence and re-engineer life. And we are just at the beginning of this transformation that is going to touch every aspect of our world and our lives, including healthcare. And we are right now part of a shift that we're going to talk about today of where we've been for the last 100, 200 years with healthcare, which is what I call generalized healthcare. So generalized healthcare is healthcare based on population averages. If you go into an average hospital or any health facility really anywhere in the world, they can treat you without knowing much about who you are. They can just treat you based on your being a human being because there's so much similarity between us. And that standardization of healthcare has actually been fantastic for the quality of the care that we have received. But now we are part of this next transition from generalized to personalize, also known as precision healthcare. In the context of precision healthcare, we're not going to be treated just because we are humans, an N of 8 billion, but because we are, each of us, an N of 1. And so as part of that treatment, our physicians, our health facilities are going to need to know who we are down to the molecular level. So they're going to need to have all of the information that we already have as part of our healthcare systems. We're going to need to have much more data about us individually, and that's why we're going to move towards larger numbers of us having our whole genomes sequenced as a foundation of our electronic health records. But we humans, we're not just genomes walking around with a bunch of other stuff. We have complex multi-omic biologies. And so as we're collecting this data, we're going to need to collect data about all of the interactive dynamic systems that make up human biology and all of biology for that matter. And that's going to unlock new kinds of treatments that we're going, and new ways of treating people that we're going to talk about today. And whether that's gene therapies or CAR T therapies or other ways of treating humans. And the basic idea is there are 3 ingredients to understand and increasingly manipulate complex systems. You need more and better data, you need more computing power, and you need stronger algorithms. And as we have that, that's going to unlock new possibilities. But as these data sets grow, that is going to facilitate the next stage of our transformation of healthcare. I talked about generalized to personalized or precision, and then beyond that, precision healthcare to the next phase, which is predictive and preventive, recognizing that we live within a range of biological possibility, and the goal of our healthcare is going to be optimizing our experience at the upper edge of possibility, and then saying what are areas where we can move beyond our innate capabilities, which I hope everybody here is vaccinated. Those people who are wearing glasses, maybe people have cochlear implants or pacemakers. So we're already doing that, but the question is, can we do it more? So that's the big picture. Mm-hmm. But to get from here to there, it's going to require a lot of doing. There's a quote that I like to use by Henry David Thoreau, who was an American naturalist, and he said, if you've built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now build the foundations under them. So the question is, how do we get from where we are now to the big vision? And so what we'd like to do, we've agreed to do, is to have this as a conversation among the 4 of us and I'm going to ask each lead person one question, but then we hope that everybody, as appropriate, will weigh in. So starting with you, Elmarie, you are involved in pharmaceuticals and the development of new drugs and new pharmaceutical interventions. How are AI and the new tools creating a new paradigm shift for how we're thinking about the development of new drugs and pharmaceuticals?
So a great question. And, so I'm not sure how many of you are very familiar with drug discovery, but if you think about drug discovery as a big funnel, and when you then going through that funnel, you start with screening hundreds and thousands of compounds, and eventually you have a handful that goes into the clinic, and then maybe one that reaches a patient. So now with AI, that funnel is so much bigger, and it's much, much faster. Going through this tunnel and getting to the medicine for the first patient. So in one example is, at Southern Methodist University in Texas, in the US, they developed this technology. It's SmartCAD, where they use AI, quantum mechanics, as well as computer-assisted design. So they can even screen 1 billion compounds per day. So now using this novel technology, it's moving drug discovery actually quite fast. And I know, Sarah, you had an interesting example about digital twins.
I did. Thank you, Elmarie. So for digital twins, I don't know if folks in the audience are familiar with what they are, but essentially it's a virtual representation of a person, it could be a physical object or even a process. And so you create it in a digital world, but it mimics reality. And so why it's so exciting for especially personalized medicine is the ability to create your own digital twin and be able to run experiments on that digital twin. And why this matters, especially in pharma with clinical trials, is the fact of, you're able to actually meet virtual patients before you even start the trial. So if you're thinking about trial design, if you're thinking about target populations, if you're thinking about safety, efficacy, you can actually do all these assessments up front and then really streamline what you're doing with your clinical trial. So to Elmarie's point, the impact of the work that we do is getting the medicines to patients where it's actually effective. And another key, I'll just add to this, is the rare disease aspect to this. So there's some patient populations where there's just not critical mass. And so with virtual patients and with digital twins, you're actually able to grow that patient population with this virtual group, and even have placebo groups, control groups that you can run your experiments with. So it's very exciting, but I will preface, it doesn't mean right now that we're there. So tomorrow you can't go out, and I can't create my own digital twin today, but it is coming, and there are a lot of experiments that are currently being done with different agencies, pharma companies who are delving into using digital twins.
Yeah, and it's really exciting because if you can, as Sarah said, having a digital twin can really help with your care. But if everybody has digital twins, and these digital twins have more and more data associated with them, then collectively we can get these mass data sets. And coming back to the issue of drug discovery, right now on average in the United States to develop a new drug, it can take up to 15 years and cost up to $3.5 billion. And so when people talk about these new capabilities, I think lots of people, not smart, sophisticated people like you, but lots of people imagine there's like the magic AI button. I'm just gonna press the magic AI button, and it's like, oh my God, here's the cure for cancer. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can actually be a bunch of really boring stuff. Because if you think of how is that 15 years spent, and what's the allocation of time? Some of it is just figuring out, like, who are the people who we're going to experiment with? Who are the cohorts? Part of it is accounting. Part of it is figuring out, like, who's going to pay the electricity. It's all these little things that add up to these big things. And let's just say that based on all of these inputs and all of these efficiencies and increasing human capacity, and one researcher using these kinds of capabilities can do in 5 or 10 years from now, can do the work of 10 people today, we can start to compress that cost, let alone the big picture stuff that you're talking about with hypothesis generation. So I think that our minds tend to go to the really exciting, innovative stuff of saying, well, I'm going to look at the universe, I'm going to look at 8 billion digital twins and come up with this. And I think that we're going to have more of that. But I think we should really think of this as at every level. And we should also think, again, in this big picture vision of the very real applications. As I said, I hope everybody here was vaccinated. I hope you've gotten your COVID-19 boosters. And we kind of, I think, now take for granted just the magic of these COVID-19 vaccines. But the number of innovations that had to come together so quickly with mRNA technology, with the lipid nanoparticles, all of these different things that were decades in the making, all had to come together. And across the board, we're seeing a renaissance or even a beginning, but a renaissance for the case of gene therapies, this whole new series of interventions, whether it's gene therapies, I mentioned immunotherapies like CAR T, beginning, as Sarah mentioned, of pharmacogenomics, trying to match each person's individual biology with probabilities about what interventions might work best for them. So Sarah, question for you, again, as the lead, with everybody pitching in. What are the kind of new modalities, new interventions that you're most excited about and you think are most promising?
Great question. I think there's many things, but I'm going to start with a very simple example. And this is really going back to what Jamie talked about at the beginning of personalized medicine. So I don't know how many of you actually had coffee or tea this morning, but everybody reacts to caffeine a little bit differently, right? So you might have heard this from your friends. Some will have a cup of coffee and they will be, awake all night and unable to fall asleep. Others will have caffeine and they'll be able to take a 3-hour nap afterwards and be completely unaffected. And what this speaks to is that even though we are a collective species, each of us have our own body chemistry. And so your body is going to react to, and think about medications in the same way, your body is going to react to different medicines in very different ways than other folks, right? It's related to your genetics, how your liver works, how it processes different medications. So when we think about, at least for me, what's most promising is this idea of, okay, hyper-personalized medicine, where a doctor can take my, let's say, digital twin, run experiments, and say, Sarah, we've looked at all these different doses, and we found that this one particular dose is the most effective. It's not more, it's not less, it's exactly what you need. And for too long, I feel in healthcare, we have fell into this one-size-fits-all model, but it doesn't work for everybody that way. And especially with dosage and really having accurate, effective treatments, this is something that I find that's going to be very exciting that we'll see much more of in the coming years.
Something exciting, actually. You should check it out on Google. So AstraZeneca developed a large language model called Milton, where they used 500,000 participants were actually in the UK data bank, and they used that to develop this model to then predict more than 1,000 diseases well before you actually develop the disease. So technology is actually moving quite fast, is helping to get to that hyper-personalization that Sarah talked about, and then also underscores the importance of data and having quality data to train these models, but then also to help patients in the long run identify the right biomarkers and also targets for effective treatment.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and so it's really the range of new kinds of interventions are so exciting. Yeah. So from these diagnostic kinds of tools we mentioned before, moving toward prediction and prevention. I mean, right now, what we call healthcare is really symptom-based sick care. Like people tend to show up in the health facilities when they have a symptom, but let's say it's for a genetic disorder. If you get it when you're 70, you have a symptom of some genetic abnormality that you were born with. That symptom has an origin that's 70 years and 9 months old. And so if you had had that information, if your parents had had that information, there's a whole range of different possibilities, going from treating it earlier in life through some kind of preventions, even lifestyle is obviously extremely powerful. There are fetal surgeries increasingly, and we have the world's first that we know about 3 genome-edited CRISPR babies right now. It's highly unethical, and I was a member of the World Health Organization Expert Advisory Committee on Human Genome Editing. We took a very, very strong position against that. But the future of humans, long-term, is genome-edited. We will be a genome-edited species. That doesn't mean it's safe now, but we really need to start thinking about how do we move from the systems that we have to where we need to be. Gene therapies. I mean, right now, there was the first dawn of gene therapy, which came to a crashing halt in the late 90s when a patient at the University of Pennsylvania died from a terrible accident. And now, again, we're in this next phase where we've had the first approvals in the UK and the United States and elsewhere for gene therapies that looks like they're curing sickle cell disease, but thousands of new applications for gene therapies in the approval pipeline. Immunotherapies, CAR T therapies, basically taking out people's cells and engineering them to give us not just cancer-fighting superpowers, but superpowers to ward off all kinds of unnecessary invaders. Again, with these intersecting tools of the AI, genetics, biotechnology, and other revolutions, something that we've done with my own father after he had a cancer diagnosis, but extracting cells, sending those cells into a lab to be expanded into hundreds of batches of these cancer cells, and then trying different treatments on these cancer cells, these personalized cancer cells in a lab, to get a sense, at least, of what kinds of treatments are more likely to work inside the real patient versus not. So we can move away with all of this data and all of this information, move away from the trial and error, which is actually much better than everything that we've done in the past. But the more informed we are, the more targeted we can be with our interventions. And all of this, it sounds great, but we've got to get from here to there. And it's not any single innovation. And Saeed, we're coming to you in a moment, but it's about how do we create an innovation ecosystem where we can't predict where everything is going. We're talking about these very complex systems. And then humans are very complex. And so we need to create these environments where people have the tools that they need to interact and grow, where there's opportunities not just to have research in laboratories, but to have that research expand out into the real world. Saeed, that's the world that you operate in. How can we think about building innovation ecosystems? What are the lessons from the rest of the world that inform what you're doing in the UAE? And as in so many situations, what are you doing in the UAE that can inform what we're doing elsewhere?
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we've started 10 years ago, and first we started from tech, is supporting the tech startups coming into the ecosystem and integrating them with the government and with education. And we have successfully built more than 1,000 startups through this pipeline or process. And then we moved into media tech, and now we're in science. Today, I think we've been open as M5 Science for the past year and a half, and we were able to grow that community. So we're good at growing communities. And growing communities doesn't come only from just knowing and telling what they should do. We became first in the listening mode to be able to listen to the startups that we have, and we started to look at the government's vision and what the government wants to do. The UAE government was very proactive when it comes to welcoming more health tech startups, more health tech innovation, and streamlining the process for them to come. So we work with regulation, we work with the government, we work with hospitals. One of the things that, let's say, Dubai government have done, they merged the hospitals with the university in order to merge the research and then work together. So us from the industry, we come in and look at this industry and try to host it and try and listen to the startups that are coming. So we've seen it grow, and we continue to see it grow. And the interesting part, I think, where we sit is an interesting part, because when we talked about a digital twin, we actually have seen this technology coming from different industries. So now I can see it coming to humans, which is more exciting. But I think we've seen it with IT, we've seen it with manufacturing. We have actually a startup that does digital twin in manufacturing, right? But now we're going into human, which is more interesting. And the interesting part is, how do you integrate even them to add to this ecosystem as well? So the excitement is there. We're growing as we go. The positive thing is that we are able to play as industry and also integrate the universities. Today, we also speak to universities to grow that ecosystem, because the guys who are sitting with us are, let's say, mid-management or researchers who have been doing research for the past 10 years, and they integrate with the universities for them to further the research. So here you have someone who's been a researcher and has a business mind, and then you integrate them with academia. So it's an interesting mix that we have, and I'm excited to see more things come. So there is a lot of development in the past 1 year and a half, but that's a lot of work that has been done in the past 10 years or 20 years in UAE and globally.
Yeah, and I think for any of us, I think many people here, if this is your first time in UAE, I'm sure you're impressed. But for those of us who come regularly, it's even more impressive because of the rate of learning in this government and in this society. That every time you come, it's like Singapore has been another of these kind of fast learning societies. that recognize that human capital is the greatest form of capital. UAE obviously has natural resource wealth that Singapore doesn't have. But unlike many, many countries with this level of natural resource wealth, I think the government of the UAE and the people of UAE really recognize what is the true oil. And the true oil is human capital and human imagination. Sarah, you're you're at NYU Langone, which has gone actually over the last 10, 20 years from a kind of an also-ran to a juggernaut by embracing innovation. Anything you'd like to add on how to foster these kind of productive innovation ecosystems?
Yeah, I think adding to what Saeed already shared, it's really about having the dialogue. So the dialogue between the startups, the founders, the hospitals, but especially the regulators. So in the US, it's the FDA. In Europe, it's the EMA, European Medical Agency. And so it's working with these folks because they don't have all the answers either. They're also seeing digital twins for the first time, for example. How are we going to look at this data and accept it? They really are the gatekeepers of healthcare. They are the barrier almost between products that are there that are maybe not mature yet to be in market. But it's having that dialogue with them and really figuring out what should the policies be, because these are going to be long lasting, and we do need to understand this technology and the application. So I feel that that's one thing that NYU has done really well, is just keeping up the dialogue, having an open discussion, and also being upfront and honest. A lot of this is emerging tech. No product has ever been launched without a bug in the system. I think we all know that. So it's being very honest and upfront about the challenges that we're all facing, but collectively moving the needle forward so we can actually address those together.
Just a point with regards to the same topic. We've seen also many startups who moved from Europe and US to come to UAE and start speaking to the government, because the government is very proactive. So sometimes it might be difficult in US because of the regulation, but they find it easier to speak to the people over here.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a great initiative, because we continue to see more people coming in and supporting. Even we have a startup at M5 that was doing research in Europe, and he moved because he saw that this part of the world has a specific disease or specific research that needs to be conducted further than the European.
Yeah, and we heard Khalfan this morning talking about the UAE biobank of genetic information, and it, like with the UK biobank that was referenced earlier, it's not just that bigger is better for these biobanks. It needs to be bigger and higher quality. And a country, even a younger country like the UAE, actually has certain advantages. In the United States, we have such a mixed bag of different electronic health record systems, different information, different kinds of privacy protections that are different by state. In the UAE, in these smaller places, UAE, Singapore, Finland, Estonia, there's actually an opportunity to build models that can more easily be perfected in a smaller place. And rather than have the innovation channel go from the bigger, more developed societies like the United States and Europe, and then arrive here, there's now a real opportunity for innovation to travel the other way. And that these kinds of countries like UAE, proving as testing grounds for new ways of doing things. And really, I talked about this transition to precision, and from precision to predictive and preventive. And when you have a single-payer healthcare system, and when you have a government that is really trying to say, how can we optimize the overall health of the population, there's a real opportunity to create models that can be exported really without limit to other places. But again, there's the nuts and bolts of talking about the big things and making it. So Elmarie, you are deep into the process of developing new approaches for actually creating products that serve people now. I mean, you need to kind of point into the future. So what are the kind of novel and better methodologies for accelerating the development of higher quality new drugs?
I'll provide two more examples. I don't know how many of you have heard of a body on a chip or organ on a chip.
Yeah.
So this is novel technology that actually was developed at Wake Forest Research Institute in North Carolina, my home state, and where they use 3D printing to create a model that they infuse with human cells to allow you to test, candidate drugs and test it faster using these models. And they are also much more predictive than the animal models, for example. So because it's using actual human cells. So that's actually, I think, is a very cool example in how they developed this model and how they're actually using it. And then now they also advance that to allow them to track and test cancer cells in the same model and test you talked about cell therapy earlier, but it's also then using the model to test different drugs. And so that's then the second example that I wanted to highlight. As a pathologist, I have to talk about pathology because there's been a lot of change actually in the field of pathology and computational pathology particularly. So one model that's being developed is it's a continuous, so immunohistochemistry. It's the gold standard for many, many years, trying to identify specific markers or identify exactly what the tumor type is, for example. So a step up from that was a new model was developed around computational pathology, where AI is being used to scan much wider fields and much more in depth each sample that you analyze. So you collect much more data, and then that information then can be used to identify the right patients with very specific biomarkers to either to test candidate drugs in the clinical trials, or in real cases, once a drug has been approved, to administer the right medication to patients. So two great examples.
Yeah, really exciting. And as exciting as all of this is, the real meaning will happen when more and more people have access to it. And that's what I always say is that issues of equity and access can't be what we do at the end. We have to be thinking about that at every stage along the way, not just about distribution, but also about innovation. There's a lot of brain power that's distributed around the world, and if we don't access it, that is a tax on all of us. Our innovation process will be slower, and the ways that we innovate won't actually reach the people who we need it to reach. And because those people are the people who are very likely going to be inventing the cures for diseases that we ourselves may have, equity is the ultimate form, at least in my view, of selfishness. Like, we need to help people because it's the most selfish thing we can do for ourselves in our interconnected world. But Sarah, how do you think about issues of, maybe asking everybody because it's such an important, how do you think about issues of equity and access in the context of this conversation?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts, but I'll just share a few. The first is really thinking about participating in a clinical trial as a civic duty. And I first heard that from Leah Johnson. She had a TED Talk, and she was talking about how, there's a social stigma that we have around clinical trials. The average person doesn't really understand what does a trial really include, what's expected of me, what's going to happen to me, what happens if it fails. So there's a lot of risks involved and education that needs to happen. And so when we're thinking about equity and access, it's actually really thinking about, okay, how would we reposition clinical trials to really be for the people bottom line? How do we empower people to actually participate? And COVID-19, was another great example. I had some friends that actually volunteered in the early days for some clinical trials. And we viewed them, I know in my friend group, almost as heroes, as this very altruistic act that they were doing, because they knew, okay, they needed volunteers, We're working on vaccines globally. We're all collectively here trying to solve this problem. So this was almost their act to kind of be able to step in and volunteer in this way, knowing that if we can find a vaccine and a solution, this would help millions and millions of people in their lives. So I think there's a repositioning of how we'll think about equity and access and really being able to open the doors for everyone to participate in a clinical trial in their lifetime. But the second kind of caveat to this, I'll just share one pitfall, but with great power comes great responsibility, same with the access to all that data. And so it's really thinking about, okay, when we're getting into these more personalized realms, how is that data being used? Who has access to it? And I know especially in the US, one concern that I have is, okay, if we have patients that are now participating in more clinical trials, could it be a situation where if we had a patient, Charlie, for example, we've done the testing and we know that Charlie has an 80% chance of developing some type of disease or ailment in his life, that his insurance premiums go up, that we're now almost charging Charlie a lot of money just for this fact of being genetically dispositioned to have something or have a disease later in life. So I think there's a lot of things I'm excited about with equity and access in terms of the civic duty, but I think there's a lot of other things that we need to collectively have discussions about and dialogue for how do we do this right.
Great. Yep, Saeed?
From our perspective, because we work a lot with startups, government, and education, we try to integrate everyone and try to find opportunities where we can open up this and also involve the wider community, because we believe that together we can achieve so much. So I think there is a lot of things that we try to do and try to integrate and open up as much as possible so people can support us. Because today, even I'm sitting in this crowd and someone is listening and will come up to me, we can integrate and work together. So there is a lot of things. I think the most important thing is awareness. Everyone has to be aware, everyone has to be educated, and then we can open the wider possibilities. Maybe someone heard about the digital twin from the IT world and will open up and build something great.
Yep.
So I think there is a lot of conversations, and I've seen it in different ecosystems, that the more we discuss, the more we're going to explore opportunities.
Great.
For me, I think patients are becoming much more powerful. I think as a patient, you know a lot more about the disease that you have, thankfully, due to technology. I mean, Google, Copilot, new technologies that exist. But the other also opportunities is around digital health, for example. So countries that invested quite significantly, even during COVID, with infrastructure and education, like Rwanda, for example, they are experiencing the benefits and coming out through that. So I would say it's a collaborative partnership. So Sarah, you talked about clinical trials, you talk about the government and the communities, everybody working together, and the patients, stepping up and speaking up about their role in their health and managing that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. All of these technologies that we're talking about are so exciting that there's a tendency to say, well, this is a story about technology. But it's not. It's a story about values. Technology, it should be at least, the means to the end of realizing our best values. And I think that's really, really important. And then there's the question, well, how do you connect values and capabilities? And for me, the single word, although it's boring and unsexy, is governance. And people tend to think that governance and regulation are synonyms, but they are not. Governance is the big category of what we all do at every level to make sure that our values are woven in to all of these systems. The role that governments play, regulation, is one piece of that. But these technologies are so distributed and so diversified and so complex that if we're only waiting for our governments to be the sole mechanisms for realizing our values, it's a job that's bigger than what our governments can do, but it's not bigger than what we can all do together. So with that, we have about 5 more minutes. I think we can take 2 burning questions if anybody has one. Any burning questions? That is a hand of a burning, yes. All right, we'll do 1 and then 2. Yep.
Evolution Foundation here in Saudi Arabia is financing the X Prize Health Span with other groups. The goal is very clear. Biological rejuvenation of over 10 years by 2030. There are hundreds of teams participating. I know 5 of those teams competing. Are you involved in any of these? How familiar are you with the Longevity Health Span X Prize? $101 million, the biggest prize in human history ever.
So let me take this one, unless you all I'm deeply involved with this, and nice to see you, my friend. And this is very exciting. And this is another one of those things where people like us who write about this think that we are on the verge of a potential expansion of just of thinking a little bit differently about the human aging process. And there is a whole industry of people who are saying we are just going to overcome biological death. So I'm going to take a flyer here. I don't think that's going to be possible at all. But certainly, can we all live healthier lives? Absolutely. We know about the blue zone stuff. Can we expand average lifespan and health span? Absolutely, 100% yes, because we've already done it. We've already done it in the societies that have people who live longer and live healthier. And so all we have to do, we don't have to come up with any new interventions. All we have to do is to say, well, how have we expanded human health span and lifespan over the last 100 years? And we've done it with food, with medicine, with public health, with healthcare, and all of these kinds of things. So if we want to expand average lifespan and health span, what we should be doing, coming back to our issue of equity, is saying, well, where are the places where people, there's the greatest infant mortality, the greatest disease burden, where people are dying of curable infectious diseases, and that is probably the majority of the human population. So that, but on the other end of the spectrum, we share this view that if we can think a little bit differently, if there are systemic ways to slow the aging process, that's in everybody's interest. It's not just about Silicon Valley billionaires, it's really about everybody, because so many of the diseases that we're so worried about are correlated with aging. And so if we can figure out, which we haven't done yet, what are the mechanisms of aging and slow them, and if we just delay the onset of the things that we don't want, cancer, heart disease, dementia, just do it by 1 year on average. That would be trillions of dollars of savings. So the X Prize, everyone should learn about it, but it's very exciting. All right, last question from you.
So a bit of a double question. Super exciting what's happening with the future of vaccines and vaccinology. You know, cancer, lung cancer, malaria,
Yep.
HIV, etc. So what do you see as the future frontiers for vaccine research? And what could be sort of new emergent areas within that? And then on the other side, we also know that biomedical disinformation is rising. And some entities, some sort of rogue nation states, such as Russia, are utilizing biomedical disinformation not to sell their own pharma, right, but to achieve geopolitical goals. And that's obviously creating, you know, increasingly expanding amount of damage. So what are the strategies to really combat that disinformation as vaccine science is becoming more and more futuristic?
So why don't you take the future of vaccines, and I'll do the disinformation.
Well, but there was also, during COVID, all the misinformation around vaccines, correct? And that
Right, yeah.
led to some communities where the vaccines were not administered, and then the spread of COVID. So I think it's truly connected. So for vaccine research, I mean, I think we learned a lot, and we during COVID with the advance of the mRNA vaccines, and how important it is for collaboration across pharma as well as biotech to share where things are going. So I would say, so the future is in more personalized. And vaccination, and so the methodology is so.
Yes.
Yes.
Past damage.
So-
So RSV, cancer, there's a lot of, whether it's just with mRNA as a delivery mechanism, there's a whole suite of different new targets, but you keep going.
No,
Yeah.
you're spot on. So yes, so absolutely. So there's lots of different targets. Yeah.
I'll also just quickly add that it's not just research, like these are modalities for treatment, but what we're also seeing is that there's a wider range of us now going after other diseases that aren't so heavily funded. So looking at, I hate calling it rare disease because every disease is a disease and someone is living with it and having acute episodes. So that's another expansion piece of the research itself. It's actually being able to go into these other disease states, other disease pathways, and look at research.
So, well, there's lots of rare diseases that are being targeted, but I think the point is, as we develop these broad suite of capabilities, rare diseases are rare individually, but not rare collectively. And so if we can lay a foundation of common tools to address and understand rare diseases with these digital twinning and all the things that we've talked about, with then specific additional applications, then that is really could be something very exciting. Just coming to the second part of your question, which is really essential for us, there's information and disinformation. So for information, the things that we're talking about, this is really about providing quality information, distributing access and capabilities so that researchers and patients and other people around the world can contribute their brain power to building a better future for humanity. There is also misinformation and disinformation, and with our increasingly decentralized information networks, it's basically information attacks, and the information attacks are insidious because they are attacks really on the credibility of information itself. That is the strategy. I think it's called flood the channel with, I don't want to use a bad word, but I'll call it flood the channel with shoot, and that's what we are seeing. And so it's my view that it's not enough for us to say we need to get positive information out there, because what we're seeing in all of our social media is positive information is being overwhelmed by the nefarious actors and others who are flooding the channels with shoot, with misinformation. So it is my view, and I say this as an American who promotes free speech, that it is just insane for us not to think about governance and regulation of social media. That if these are totally open networks where people who are trying to overthrow our systems of truth have a free reign, that is really dangerous for everybody. And again, broader points, just summarizing everything that we've discussed here today, we are at the beginning of a pretty fundamental transformation and acceleration of our capabilities. It will have huge implications for healthcare and for everything else. But if we can imagine a better world, and we can imagine these same capabilities leading us to a terrible place, the difference between that world that we want and that world that we don't want is us. And this isn't something where we just sit back and think somebody else is going to do it. Everybody has a role wherever you are in building the kind of future that we'd like to inhabit. So with that, let me thank my fellow panelists and thank all of you. And we'll all be around, so if you want to talk to us over the next couple of days, we would welcome it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.